podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Factor the Future, and I'm here with Alexandria Burek as always. I'm A.W. Schultz. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about worker of tomorrow and motivation. And Alexandra, the way I thought I'd open this up is I was part of a survey about a year ago, and we got about 4,000 people that were able to complete this survey. Many different industries, but primarily within the manufacturing and the energy sectors of it. What I found interesting in this survey was about 60% of those that we surveyed feel that they're going to be looking for a new position in the next 12 months. And for us, when we did this survey, we're a little surprised about that so many people are just able to pack up and leave and go somewhere else at little to no notice. And it kind of led me down to the route of what drives employees, what's motivation for it. And in that, I've been doing some research on what drives motivation and creates that human-centric approach, very similar to when I always talk about Industrial 5.0. And it came across one theory that has really been kind of circling around that I've been spending a lot of time in my research, and it's around the self-determinational theory. And for the listeners that may not know what this is, it was originally developed back in the I'm going to say 80s by Dickey and Ryan. And the idea is it's comes around based on three things. The first thing is for employees to have a sense of relatedness to their work. You go to work, you have relationships, you have friends, you get along with others, and so be it. The second is the competency. So feeling that you know how to do your job, certainly you feel like you can do it on a day-to-day basis and want to do better. And then the third is the idea of autonomy. That, for me is like my boss being able to feel that I can do some of the day-to-day things and give me responsibilities. Now, I tell you the story is the article I was reading was by Lechler and Human, and it just came out this year. And it was a survey about motivation of young project professionals. So when we say young, we're talking about the Generation Y and millennials. And when they surveyed these individuals, a couple of things that came forward. One wasn't necessarily the salary that they were being paid, but it was a common trend around the motivations of they want to be able to learn and develop. Their relatedness and connectionness, going back to the self-determination theory. To be able to create and deliver, being able to feel like they have an impact on it, the competency, and the idea to work autonomously. So given responsibility and being able to solve problems on their own. Remember, these are primarily project managers. I thought that was kind of I don't want to say eye-opening, but it falls within some of the trends that I've seen, I've read, I've been a part of over the last couple of years. And certainly, when COVID hit, we walked into something called the Great Resignation. And, up to that point, I hadn't even heard about it until I started reading about it. And there's just massive people just quitting their jobs or quietly quitting.
Yeah. I mean,
so I gave you all that information. Anything surprise you about this?
I mean, nothing is really surprising. I think I feel the same as the majority of your, survey participants. As we were talking about this, I just can't be surprised by 60% of people looking for a new job. I mean, I think about me personally, it was probably late Q3. I mean, I've been on this whole journey for 2 years, but late Q3 this year, I was like, well, I've got to do something because the cost of living is not going down. I don't see that in my magic ball in my future, of like things returning back down to pre, 2024 prices, like 2023, 2022. So, I mean, I look at the cost of just normal household items. I'm a, white collar worker, middle class person, and I make a pretty good salary, but I'm like, I can't survive on this. I literally can't survive on this. So I was forced in the last, I would say 3 months, to get real serious, look in the mirror and be like, what are we going to do about it? And I have done everything I can at the company I'm at to communicate, interest in growth opportunities, higher roles in the organization where I can bring with me my social equity, my tribal knowledge, and all these other things that I think do give the organization an immense amount of value. But my concern with staying at companies, which is I'm sure much of the 60% of the people that you mentioned, is that companies seem to be much more willing to pay somebody from the outside with quote unquote fresh ideas. That's great. The salary that they could otherwise just pay the person who has already developed the relationships with the people in the organization, who knows who to contact within the organization to accomplish certain things, and who has a real like grasp about just generally the organization's culture and kind of the vision for the organization. So that's just befuddling to me that companies just don't want to pay. They could just pay $20,000-$30,000 more to the employee to probably 50% of those 60% of employees that are leaving. If that same company just had that conversation with that employee and said, what would it cost? Like, what would it take to keep you? I would say that probably 40% of that 60% population would say $20,000 would allow me to stay. And then we've solved the problem for the individual, we've solved the problem for the company, but I just don't think companies and managers seem to be willing to do that. They seem to be willing to just take the resignation, deal with the loss of and the gap of the operational kind of situation, and just say, oh well, we'll have to get by until we find someone new, and then just it is what it is. The show must go on. On the note of like learning and development, I think you mentioned that, and if you didn't, I know that was part of the things that we wanted to talk about today. So I was just thinking, why wouldn't companies, do something simple like provide their employees with a masterclass subscription? Give them an hour, 2 hours a week, a month, whatever, like 5 hours a month, or, 4 hours a month, whatever it is that they should be designating for personal development. Like it doesn't need to be something where a manager needs to coach, but it could be something like, hey, when we have our one-on-ones, I want to know what you've learned. What self-development have you done in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Because the person who's putting into themselves is going to deliver to the organization tenfold. I've experienced that myself by growing, learning, networking, doing all these other things outside of work, because that's the culture where I work. I've still been able to bring immense value compared to where I was before by putting the time and energy into learning and developing myself. So I think a company can really benefit and stand out competitively by just doing something like that, like having a culture around growth and education. I think simple masterclass subscription, which is like $7 a month to their employees, tax deductible, go for it. Or just even just like a per diem, like a $50 per diem per month to the employee to go, hey, go learn something. People could do it for hobbies. Doesn't matter. Those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. But yeah, I hope that maybe this great resignation, followed by the quiet quitting, followed by this like mass migration and change up here that seems to be on the horizon, will be the time that it gets into the employers' heads to say, hey, maybe we've been doing this all wrong all along. I don't know. What do you think about that?
A couple of things I thought. One, you bring up a good point, is about so often, I've had bosses, or I've been a boss, and you've got a one-on-one with the employees, and it's an ongoing, it's on the calendar. It's always what a Friday
Mm-hmm.
afternoon or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And there's what you're usually talking about is what's fresh on the mind. Where if the manager is having that conversation about what investments that individual has been doing into themselves, that returns on that manager. So I look at it, I think it's a phenomenal idea, and it also brings forward just that conversation that you want to have with that employee of, what are you doing to better yourself, to better the company.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I guess I thought of is like, it's so often, and this is particular companies that have we'll say a strong HR department, that they are, they're very protective on ensuring that all the employees don't know each other's salaries.
Yeah.
And they don't want you talking about it because they don't want someone to know that the others are making more or less money than you, because it brings about that conversation. Well, why is that? So then I guess I also think about when you're sitting there asking, why can't I get a raise or be fitted for what my salary, presents? It might be the question is, well, maybe HR doesn't want to go down that route. They don't want to have that tough conversation of, what's right sizing the salaries. And it's not solving any problem, but it's actually,
it's a liability.
It's a liability, and for me, they're more concerned with protecting the company than protecting the employee and just letting that employee leave.
Yeah.
So that's what's going through my head.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I didn't see our conversation going here, but it's really interesting that it has, because just recently we were on a conference call and it really got windy, right? Like we were talking about maintenance. All of a sudden it turned into our semi truck drivers compensation or mechanics compensation, and the fact that we don't have an equal or, kind of standardized compensation, whatever. And it really spiraled. And I'd also been in a meeting with our VP of our department, and he was like, hey, I need the MIP, which is usually like management, something incentive plan. That's what it is, management incentive plan. So then part of the conversation in the conference call came up that, oh, well, we're doing a pay analysis, right? So then I was like, well, wait a second then. Great. I said, are we doing this for managers? Because now I'm on the team of like, hey, let's do this. Let's look into this. Like, is the org chart reflective? How does that look? Right? Because you move an org chart, technically salaries should reflect the org chart. And I can bet you right now, most organizations, they move the org chart and then they don't change the salaries, right? It's very uncomfortable to drop people. You're almost never going to give people a pay decrease because you've demoted them in the org chart. But they're certainly also not raising up the people that suddenly slid up in the org chart because they're already accepting what that is. So I think from an employee's standpoint, and this is a cultural thing too, I think, but I try to do my, kind of like activism or whatever you want to call it. I share my salary openly with people in general scenarios. Like I have no shame or qualms about saying I make X amount of dollars in most scenarios, like coworkers, non-coworkers, friends, family, it doesn't matter. And sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes people jealous, but whatever. That's their feelings are their problem and theirs to process, not mine. But I think employees can work together by being more open and having a unified front, right? Like if a team of 6 managers said, hey, because I brought this up then subsequently after the call, I said to other people, I said, we've really shifted our org chart around. I don't know that we have a org chart and a compensation package that reflects that is mirrored of each other. I said, we really should be looking at that, because if there's people who are up in the org chart but below in salary, that's a pay disparity. There's people who maybe have been inherited and showed loyalty to the company, and they might be grossly underpaid compared to their counterparts who maybe are underperforming even compared to the kind of like tenured employee. I said, we really should, if we're going to do this exercise, we should be doing this from the top down of our organization, our department. I'm going to be shocked to see if that actually comes back and if that word, made it to wherever it needs to be and if any action comes of it. But I think if anybody's listening to this, having that conversation with your team, with your boss, with your boss's boss, with your HR department, and politely and professionally asking those questions is the first thing that you can do to try to make a positive impact on your workplace and make sure that people are being fairly compensated.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to, it wasn't really what you were trying to discuss, but I was thinking to myself that like, so I do a lot of workshops, and
Mhm.
often these individuals are sent to me from their managers. And one of the things I do in a workshop is I like to do an assessment of the departments. And so often than not, when we just do a walkthrough assessment on it, is that the managers aren't really familiar with what things are need to be changed. But what they do think needs to be changed is their employees and their staff. So they'll send them to the trainings with me, and I'm just, well, I could walk you through the best practices on that, and then but it comes down to the manager. And this particular case, a couple of weeks ago, I had I was doing a workshop on planning and scheduling, and I had four essentially maintenance managers. And I remember they were coming to me and asking, listen, look at this KPI. It doesn't reflect what's
Success.
going on,
Yeah.
and it's broken. But I can't get my boss to change it. So we've got all these open work orders down in the system, but we're not planning to do work on this. And I said, yeah, it's not going to drive any behavior on that. And he goes, what do I do to change it? And my advice was, just maybe you start taking out a different kind of metric on it. But I said, what you can do is email me, and I'll respond in a professional manner saying, I'm blah, blah, blah. This is my credentials. And well, they knew my credentials because that's why they were at my workshop, but
Right.
explain what you can be doing into that. And then from that, take that to the manager. And, I tell this story just as a kind of a gateway into, a lot of it is just the manager's not taking time to understand that, they think investing in employees, but they're not trying to better themselves, understand what they can do to be better.
Yeah, I just had like 17 thoughts going through my head as you were talking. I love this. So the first thing I'm going to say, which is just directly related to what you just said there, was okay, so they're investing, but they're doing it wrong. Like the plain fact is, and this is nothing against you and your workshops. I think your workshops are great, but I think when I'm going to say like an old school manager, because they can be of all ages, like younger managers can still be very old school, very whatever. We're not going to get into that right now. So by sending people to the workshop, like, well, we're investing in you. It's like, okay, great. You're really putting me there because you think you're going to get 5% efficiency out of me as a result of this $200 workshop that you sent me to. You think it's a day off because I spent 9 hours, getting coffee and bagels and pizza for lunch and talking about, maintenance and reliability and, how to do, preventative maintenance, all this stuff. It's like, no, that's not really what investing in employees is. It's actually taking the time to get to know them and try to better them as individuals, and like being very specific about what they can personally do to improve, not giving some peanut butter spread class or homework assignment. Not that yours is or anything like that, but I think that's one thing. I think it's really wise what you mentioned about managers not really knowing what needs to be done. I just had an experience this week where someone came to me. We were supposed to do training. We had kind of disconnected on training. First, we had training scheduled. Then it was somebody had to cancel. Then somebody else had to cancel. Then somebody else had to cancel. I was like, screw it. I'll make videos, you guys are on. I host workshops. Ask them then, because the stuff that you have questions about is the stuff that everybody in the room has questions about. You're the managers. You should really be leading the question asking, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, just ask questions when we have the designated time for questions. How about that? And the other thing that came up with, I was like, what reports are you trying to run? I'd be happy to, cater these training videos that I'm going to make for you to that specific topic. And when they had asked for it, and now I'd been talking about this for the last 4 to 7 to 10 weeks, and just like blue in the face, talking about it to all levels of our organization, like the people who are supposed to be doing it, the people who are supposed to be managing the people that are supposed to be doing it, the people who are supposed to be managing the people who are managing the people that are supposed to be doing it. Like all of these people, I've been talking about this, like I feel like hitting them with a hammer, like we have to do this. We have to do this. And the question was, well, how can we get it so that way we know when a maintenance issue occurs and when it's back in service. I said, the e-maint is the easy part. I said, I could show you that in 2 minutes. You could do that now, but we don't have the behavior. We don't have the business process in place and the buy-in from the end users. They're not executing on the first part of the plan. So none of the reporting matters. You can do the reporting all day, but without the actual business process being executed, the reports in e-maint aren't going to tell you shit. Like, I don't know. I was like, why don't we start with the business, fix the people first, and then I'll show you how to do the reports, because the reports aren't going to matter until the people are doing what they need to be doing, and it was just another example of like, God, I thought you guys knew by now that we're not doing what we said, what we need to be doing, So it's another one of like training people on things, but it's like, well, we're training people on the wrong things,
Yeah. And just bringing it back to what we started with, that these are some of the reasons why people leave. Just frustration. Don't feel like they have an impact. Lack of relatedness, I guess. It just, yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't surprising data, but I think when you start to, peel that onion back a little bit, you start to understand some of the reasons why. And certainly salary is a difference maker. But I mean, today our workforce is a little bit different. There's 20, 30 years ago, there was a commitment. You start that job and you work your career there.
You built your house around your community. You lived in the community that you worked, and your workplace was a sense of its own individual community. There were Christmas parties, and, people were friends, genuinely friends with the people they worked with, and had long-standing relationships with them. Yeah. It's a different world. It'll be interesting to see how this all shapes up. And, all I can say is I just hope that, this human-centric approach is pulled forward into a more present current reality, and not so in a distant, far out future.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Are we clocking out?
We are clocking out like finished goods. And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this episode of Factory of the Future, and stay tuned for new episodes.
Heck yeah.
All right. This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review, and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.